All right. Thanks for being here, everyone. As Mara said, I'm Courtney Jones, and I've been doing this for this will be my 32nd year. And actually, unbeknownst to me, the very first deal I ever did was a subject to property. Um, and I had no idea that that's what I was doing. It just sort of happened. And so that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. But over the years, I've built my portfolio of single family homes primarily through subject to purchases. So I've been doing this a long time, have bought over 300 houses subject to, and then my exit strategy for those is to sell them on a lease option. And so that's the exit strategy I use primarily in my business, or at least I used to. It's not my main acquisition process now, because now I'm doing a lot less and bigger buildings and apartments and hotels and things. But I still have that block of business that I purchased over a 10-year period. So yeah, I've done a bunch of these. I actually am helping two investors buy subject to properties right now. And as she was describing my history, I do a little bit of everything. So primarily I do real estate, realtor work, only for investors. I don't work with buyers or sellers, but I coach and train realtors who work with buyers and sellers. And I also do coaching of new people who are getting into the investing world. So a little bit of every bit of experience, as you can imagine, in there. I do own apartments and hotels, tax liens, notes. So if it's been done in the investing business, I've done it. The only thing I really haven't done is any kind of development yet, because I'm getting ready to develop, I think, some houses for foster kids, which is where I spend the majority of my time through some work that I do through the community and stuff. So we're going to talk about buying subject to this evening. And obviously, I cannot teach you an entire business model how to do this A to Z. But the concepts I'm going to get across for you today is basically what is subject to. And we'll kind of go into that a little bit. We're going to look at what is subject to and how does it work, where to find deals that are primed to say yes, because I always hear there's no sellers in my area that will do this, and there is, I promise. When is subject to buying favorable to other creative financing options? So when is subject to the time that you would use that versus a creative financing? We'll talk a little bit about that. What to say to sellers to get them to say yes to subject to. Part of that is not using the words subject to, because they don't know what that means any more than most of you showing up here tonight. So if I were to start talking to you and try to get you to sell me your house with this weird language that you don't understand, a confused mind is always going to say no. So we're going to talk about how to easily explain this to people to get them to say yes. Risks for subject to that you need to know as an investor and what to watch out for, things that you need to do. And then how to explain sub to realtors so that you can get them sending you deals. So that's our agenda. All right, so what is subject to? If you're not familiar with subject to, what subject to is it's buying a property subject to the existing financing that is on the property. Okay, it's also known as sub to. People will refer to it as that. Sometimes you'll even hear people say taking over the mortgage, or they'll say assume when they don't really. But as an example, a property owner owns a house. They have a loan or maybe 2 or 3 loans on the property. They sign that property over to you. The deed gets signed over to you. Okay. You now own the property. Okay. That is just in any realm, that's how it works. They still have the debt obligation, but you're essentially agreeing to pay for that. Okay, so the loan stays in their name and the property gets signed over to you, so you have ownership. So now you have the right to take the tax deductions on that property. You have the right to improve it or to sell it or to rent it or whatever. Okay, so that's essentially what subject to is. You're taking over someone else's loan, but it's not a true assumption, and it's not something you're doing through the bank. Okay, this is something that happens kind of in the background, if you will. So the answers to the most frequently asked questions we get at that point, when I describe that usually, is this legal? Okay, yes, it's perfectly legal. In fact, if you'll look on an old HUD-1 or a current closing statement, you'll see right on the pre-printed form there, subject to, okay, mortgages taken subject to is, I think it's 503 is the line. And you'll see it on both sides. You'll also see it on new closing statements. It's perfectly legal. That doesn't mean that banks like to announce it. Doesn't mean that they don't frown upon it, okay, but it is perfectly legal. And there's plenty of attorneys who teach it. One of my mentors teaches doing subject to. He's an attorney, and so it's totally perfectly legal. Okay. Why would someone do this? Is the next question. When I explain this, the first thing people say all the time is, why would someone do that? Why wouldn't they just sell their house? Okay. I can tell you from experience of what I've experienced. I've never been in the personal situation of having to do this, but I can tell you that I've bought houses from people who just didn't want the hassle of listing their property. They were in a time crunch, usually due to a foreclosure or a divorce or something that they procrastinated, and they just had a high level of motivation to be done with it. Occasionally it's been they got a job transfer and they were moving across the country and they knew they weren't going to be able to make 2 house payments. They weren't in a high enough level position to where the company was paying for one of those mortgage payments for them or whatever. So they, allow you they just want to quickly sell it. So there's lots of different reasons why individuals have a high level of motivation, but it's usually something within their personal situation that causes them to need to do things a little bit differently. Another frequently asked question is, well, what if the bank doesn't like it and the bank finds out? Will they call the note due? Okay. Yes, the bank could call the note due. As I said, I've done hundreds of these deals. I personally, knock on wood, have never had a note called due. It's very highly unlikely. I do know of 2 investors who've had their notes called due. In both situations, both of them were late on payments. And so then, therefore, maybe the bank, I don't know, I presume, started looking at them as, in more details and started seeing that, wait, something doesn't add up here. The payments aren't coming from the person that's on this mortgage and so forth. And then maybe that is what happened. I don't know exactly, but I know I've never had it done. I don't worry about it in my business because if that were to ever happen, I would just refinance and get it taken care of. So it's not a huge ordeal to me, but yes, it could happen. It's just not an everyday thing. If you think about our world and the way that it is today, everything is so very electronically done. It's not like Joe Smith is sitting there in front of your computer looking at every tiny little thing that goes by every day and seeing all the names and trying to match them up. It's all done electronically and no one's seeing anything. So I don't really think it's a big concern, but it is something that could happen. The next question we get all the time is, oh, okay, so you're assuming the loan. No, as I mentioned before, assuming is actually a legal term. It's a process where it was really very common. When I got into the business originally, a lot of mortgages were assumable at the time. There was assumable with qualifying and assumable with non-qualifying. And you really did go through the bank, and it was a process that the bank put you through, and then you would take over the mortgages. So it's different than that. People use that term just because I think it's a common word to understand it with, but it's not actually a bank approval process, and you're not talking to the bank about it at all. So it's not the formal legal process of assuming in that legal sense. Okay. This one always gets me. So a lot of people who teach subject to will say things like, oh, well, then you're not on the hook for the payments. And I think that's a load of bullpucky, to put it nicely. To me, you're ethically responsible for those payments if you sit in front of a seller and tell them you're going to start making the payments. Now, granted, you're not on the loan, and the bank doesn't know that you're responsible for making the payments, but you have sat in front of somebody and committed to make those payments for them. So to me, you are on the hook for making those payments, and it would be highly unethical to tell somebody that you're going to make those payments and then not make them. If you can't make the payments, then you should give the house back to the person, in my opinion, or try to sell it or whatever and make it so that their payments are being given. So yes and no, you are on the hook for the payments ethically and likely legally, if you ask me, but it's not going to show up on your credit. So people always say, oh, okay, so then I'm not on the hook for the payments. Well, yeah, you're on the hook because you told somebody you were going to make their payments, okay? So the risks sort of are to you as an investor that your loan could be called due, okay, which means you'd have to find another way of getting it financed. They don't call loans due and give you 24 hours to get it paid. It's usually a 60-day process from what I've heard. Another risk is that the seller could file bankruptcy. And again, it's not a huge risk because usually what happens is, and this has happened to me, what happens is you'll get a letter from the bankruptcy court or from the mortgage company, and it'll say something to the effect of, if you've recently filed bankruptcy, please disregard this. Well, when you see that, you know that it's because they have recently filed bankruptcy. So if you call their bankruptcy attorney, you can explain the process to the bankruptcy attorney, tell them you purchased the house subject to, send them over the closing paperwork, prove that that the people deeded you the house, and prove that you've been making the payments, and then they'll usually there's a formal term for it. I can't remember what it's called, but they'll remove the house from the bankruptcy. There's a formal term for it, but you just have to have a conversation. I've never lost a house due to that, but it is something to just be aware of. Another risk can be if the seller wants to buy another house. Now, this doesn't happen too often because the majority of the properties I've bought subject to have been a foreclosure type situation. The person's already 3, 4, 5 months behind on their current house payment and they need to get out from it. So they kind of know they're not going to be able to buy another house for a little while. And so it's not something that happens right away. But we did have a situation one time when the guy was transferring from Tennessee. The house was in Tennessee and he was moving to New Jersey, and because he got a job transfer, he wanted to buy another house right away. So what you do in that situation is you basically, same thing, show his new mortgage company the closing statements that you've taken over the payments, that you're making the payments. And then 99% of the time, what they'll do for that seller is they'll count it as a rental property. So they're going to give him credit for like 75%, the way they would like a rental property. So it will, if he would have qualified for, let's say, a $500,000 house, now he might only be able to qualify for $450,000 because he's got that extra 25% on the house, but it's not going to keep him from buying a house. Okay. Another risk for you as the investor is that the house could go down in value. Okay. I'm a firm believer in what goes down will come back up again. So, okay, it might go down for a year or two, but if you're planning on holding it long term, it's not really a big issue. Another risk is that the rents could decrease, and that could affect your cash flow. If you buy the property subject to a $1,900 PITI payment today, thinking that you can rent it out for $2,400, and then all of a sudden rents start to go down in that area, and now you can only rent it for, say, $2,000 or $2,100, then what $500 cash flow you were expecting to get is now a lot smaller. So that can be a risk as well, because obviously you can't renegotiate those terms on that mortgage. So those are a few of the risks involved to you. Why would you do subject to versus other creative techniques? So this one's always a hard one to explain because it's really very situational, but I always get the deed if it makes sense, which means I always buy a subject to if it makes sense. So if I'm looking at a house, for instance, there's a lot of people who teach master lease options and lease optioning a house and then lease optioning it as the buyer, and then lease optioning it to somebody else as the person who's selling it. And I am always like, why would you even go through all that hassle? Just buy it sub to. Like, then you at least have the deed and you have control of it. So to me, if it makes sense, I'm always going to go for the subject to option. I always get the deed if the rate is good and the terms are favorable. So if I'm looking at a newer loan, let's say fast forward a year from now, and somebody tries to get me to take over a 7% sub to loan, I may not be interested in taking that over. But right now, looking at loans that have happened over the last few years at 2 and 3 and 4%, I'm going to take those over subject to. So it sort of depends on the terms of the loan and what I'm willing to do and what will cash flow. If it's a property that I want to own, and if it's in an area that I want to own. Excuse me. If it's not, then I oftentimes will do some sort of other creative financing techniques that will allow me to buy a little time, fix it up, and sell it otherwise. So for me, that's just sort of my business rule. If I can get them, if I can get it subject to and I want to own it and it's a good loan and a good term, then I'm going to do that. Now, a couple of things on why subto versus other techniques from different perspectives. Usually the seller needs immediate debt relief and wants a clean break. So in that case, I'm going to do subto. With owner financing, a lot of times they'll say, I don't want to have to deal with it. I just want to be done with it. Okay, so then to me, that's a perfect subto situation. If there's not enough equity in it for them to list it without them having to come out of pocket, but it's enough for me to make a profit on, then I'll do it that way as well. I get the tax benefits when we buy it subject to. So I do like that a lot better. So the mortgage statements come to me. I'm putting in a change of address to the mortgage company to my office address. So the mortgage statements at the end of the year are coming to me. If I take over the property in June and the mortgage statement comes to me in December or January, I'll send it to the seller and tell them, you can take half of this because you paid the first half. I'm taking the second half. So let's say it's $2,000. You can take $1,000 deduction. I'll take $1,000. Obviously, from this point forward, I get them. And they know that. I tell them that when I'm buying the house as well, but they forget. So that is a huge benefit to taking that. Subject to debt does not show on your credit, which is great. You know, when you go to get other loans, you know that you're oftentimes limited by however many loans that you have, how many home loans you have. These are not going to show. So you can have 300 properties that you took over subject to, and it looks like you don't own anything. I love that. Okay. A lot of people's ego can't handle that. I don't care. I don't care if people know how much I own or where. I don't want them to be able to find it. So I do like that part. A lot of the loans right now that we're taking over and we're looking at subject to are under 5% loans. So those are way good. Like, we're happy to do that all day long. It's a no qualifying bank loan that we're getting, and we're just taking over from somebody else with it. And then we have this massive asset to go with it, with usually almost always equity built in. And then it's a lot lower out of pocket cost to get involved. Sometimes it's no money at all. If they're behind, if you choose the foreclosure option, if you're working the foreclosure leads, then usually you're going to have monthly payments to catch up. So there might be 3, 4, 5 months behind, depending on the state you're in. And then you're going to have to catch those payments up, plus attorney's fees and late fees and all that kind of stuff. So sometimes you'll have to come out of pocket a good chunk. But I mean, even if it's 10 grand, that's a lot less than you would have had to put down, say, buying a typical house with what the down payment requirements are. Now, why would I not use subto versus other creative techniques? If a seller is knowledgeable, they're going to prefer owner financing because it gives them more control. So that will be one thing. And usually these are people, like, for instance, when I was looking at an apartment building last year, originally my offer to them was to take it over subject to. And then the seller came back and is like, I'm okay with that, but I would prefer to do a new note and just owner finance it. So it was because he knew. Okay, he owned like 5 apartment buildings. He wasn't a newbie. He didn't not know better. Okay. If an attorney or a real estate agent is involved, they're almost always going to prefer an owner financing type thing because of the liability. So it's rare to be able to find those attorneys and realtors who will sanction subto until you train them. And that just takes time, which we'll get to. If the loan stinks, like the rates, the term, it's a commercial loan and it's near a reset, or the property needs a lot of work, or any of that kind of stuff, then I'm probably going to not want to do it subject to. Okay. If it's an adjustable rate, there's not a lot of those right now, but we're starting to see a little bit more of them. Or if, it's a brand new loan and they got it at 5.5. I actually just had a call from somebody yesterday. They just got the loan in the last 30 days and now they're getting a divorce. And so it's like a 5.75% interest rate, and there's no equity. They've had the house less than 30 days. I don't even know if they've made one payment yet. I don't even remember. So I'm like, I'm not interested in that. It's going to be at full market value. We've come down slightly, so in their case, I told them they'd have to come to the closing table with money, which they're going to have to do if they try to sell it anyway, right? We've had many people write us a check to buy their house. The most we ever got was $28,000. And they wrote us a $28,000 check at closing to buy their house. Actually, it was the guy I was talking about before, the guy that moved to New Jersey. If I'm unsure of the area or it just doesn't feel right, and I know that's really an ambiguous statement, but what I mean by it doesn't feel right is like sometimes I'll be talking to sellers and I get the feeling they're not being 100% honest with me about something, or they may be on the verge of filing bankruptcy, which, as I said before, is not a huge ordeal. But if they file bankruptcy right after you take it over subject to, then it might be. Because were they trying to hide something is always the question, right? What if they're going through a divorce? It's the same kind of thing. Like, are they trying to hide something? Are they trying to get over something on the court? Sometimes you just have these situations and these feelings where you're just like, I don't know, I don't feel like this is the right situation. In that case, I would probably go with a different type of a transaction than subto. If I just don't trust the seller, you ever get those times when you're talking to somebody and you just feel like they're not listening to what you're saying, that kind of a person, those are all two situations. And then if the insurance is too high, which often happens in Florida, okay, then I will not, because really what you're going to almost be doing for a short period of time is double insuring these properties. And so, because you don't want to change the insurance immediately as soon as you take off over the subject to property, because that's a red flag for the mortgage company. And so, if the insurance is outrageous, like in Florida because of hurricanes and stuff, and now you have to double insure it, you'd have to be getting a lot of equity to make that worthwhile. So those are reasons to not do subto. Okay. All right, I'm going to take a break here and give you guys a chance to ask some questions. You can just unmute yourselves if you want and shout it out, or I can actually pay attention to the chat too now because I'm not talking.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there? Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. But what percentage of these deals are you dealing directly with owners, and what percent have you ever dealt with any subject to deals with agents?
So I do now. I didn't used to. So for the first probably 10 years, I bought sub-2 properties. They were 100% direct with the owners. Over the years, I've developed a reputation. And so now I do get a lot of agent referrals. I've been around for a while now. So I will get agents who will call me and kind of say, hey, I have this situation. I heard through the grapevine you may be able to help. And so I'll buy them from agents now. What percentage? 20% from agents, 80% direct to sellers.
And then follow-up question on that. When you work with agents, how do you make sure they get covered with their commission for bringing you a deal?
Yeah, and that's actually, we're going to talk about that when we talk about dealing with agents. It depends. Every deal is different, right? And so let's say it's a $500,000 home and that agent calls me and the people are losing the house to foreclosure in 3 days, and there's a $10,000 fee that needs to be paid in back payments to keep them from having a foreclosure, and the agent's like, oh, and by the way, I want 20 grand on, or whatever, then I just have a conversation with all of them. So I prefer to do it in person, but I'll do it on a 3-way call, and I'll just say, look, the numbers just don't work out for this. My history, it shows that I'm going to be lucky to find a $20,000 down payment on this. I can't give away my entire profit and make up all your payments. So I need you guys to figure out what the heck what's most important here. To me, the most important thing, Mr. Seller, Mr. Agent, is saving this house from going to foreclosure and making sure the seller doesn't have a foreclosure on their record. Mrs. Agent, I would think that, as a fiduciary in this deal, you would want the same. What I'm willing to do is catch up the $10,000 back payments, and I'll give you $5,000 now, agent, because you brought this lead to me, and then I'll promise to list my next house with you, or even though I'm an agent, I do it all the time because I don't list houses. I'll promise to list my next house with you, or I'll give you a note for the remaining $5,000. I'm not paying you $20,000. I'm doing all the work, or whatever. I'll have those conversations. So I'll do that in that scenario if it's like right in the middle of the deal. If the agent comes to me and says, hey, I've heard you buy these properties, I have somebody, I'm looking at listing this house or whatever, can you help me with this deal? Then I might do it a little differently. I'll say to them, yeah, but I need to know in these situations that you're going to be flexible, because I'm not always going to be able to pay you your whole commission up front. I'll do what I can, but obviously I got to make a profit too. So we have to trust each other a little bit, and we have to have those communications and conversations up front. So how I do it is different every single time for the most part, because it just depends on the deal and what we're going to be able to get out of that and what the scenario and situation is.
Thank you.
I'm still trying to figure out what what motivates the seller to do this, right? Like you mentioned that the buyer's taking over the payments, but is there some sort of like a payment, a lump sum payment that's made to the seller, in exchange for the property?
It depends. The answer to every real estate question, right? Yeah, it totally depends. Like the lady I told you that called yesterday. Okay, say they just bought the house. They haven't even made one house payment. Maybe they made one. I don't remember. Would she get any money? No, no. I mean, the house has come down. She's gonna have to pay me to take over to get it done. So it just depends. If there's $40,000 worth of true equity in there, and by true equity, I mean, let's say they owe 500,000 on it and the house would comp today for 550. Okay. They think they have $50,000 worth of equity, but that's not true because there's going to be home repairs that need to be done, which they would have to make if they were listing it. There's real estate commissions that are going to have to be paid, all of those things. Just the way we calculate all those things when we're doing a rental, you calculate those in this situation when you're buying those properties. So their true equity in that case is about $10,000, because once you take all that away, you're looking at about a 20% discount when it comes to all of that. So that's when I will show them, I basically do a seller net sheet to them and show them, look, if you were to sell this through a realtor right now, here's what you would walk away with. Let's say as an example, it's 520. Okay. Now they have $20,000 worth of equity because they owe 500 on it. So I would make arrangements to get them that 20,000 if I think that it's truly worth 550 and I'm okay with taking up just $30,000 worth of equity. So in that case, let's say they have $20,000 coming to them, in my opinion, and they agree, I get them to agree to that. Then what I might say to them is, what are you going to be doing next? Okay, where are you going? What's happening? So if they're moving somewhere and they need that $20,000, then yes, I'm going to try to get them that $20,000 so that they can buy their next house or do whatever it is that they're planning on doing, downsizing or whatever. If they don't need that right away, then I might give them a note against the house so that now it's a second mortgage. And so I would make payments to them for that. Sometimes if they're in a desperate situation because it's a foreclosure, they're going to lose it anyway, I won't give them anything. It just depends on the situation. And I completely understand that it doesn't seem like logical to you and I for a few reasons, because we've just come out of several years worth of incredible market where you just put a sign in the yard and the houses sell for over asking price. But remember, that's not the norm, number one. And then people's motivations are just, there's a lot of people who just don't want to deal with realtors, who don't want people into their private business, who don't want to talk about money with people, who are urgently needing to get rid of a house. There's a lot of different motivations for it. Does that help a little?
Yeah, I think the foreclosure example, I think, is one that's probably, at least in my mind, more applicable to the seller, because at that point, if they're going to lose the house anyway and damage their credit, you're kind of giving them an out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then like the guy I was telling you about that moved to New Jersey, honestly, gosh, this is being recorded. Hopefully he never sees this, but this dude was just lazy. Like he knew he was being transferred. He waited till the last dang minute to do anything about it. And like a week before he's leaving to go to New Jersey and knows he can't afford two houses, he called us and was like, I have to be gone in 3 days. And we were like, okay. And we did the numbers, and he had only owned the house, I want to say maybe a year and a half. And he didn't have a lot of equity in it. This was in the outskirts of Knoxville, which doesn't appreciate all that much. And we were like, yeah, you're going to have to pay us. Like, there's just not enough equity in the house for it to be worth us to do. And plus, you're in the outskirts, which normally I would be able to get that house occupied within about a 2 to 3 week period. But you're in the outskirts. It's probably going to take me 2 months. I've got to prepare for that extra cushion of cash. So I'm like, I basically just told him, there's really nothing we can do unless you can come to closing with money. And he was like, well, how much? And I said, I said, well, I calculated it out and said, well, if you were to sell it through a normal realtor, through all the normal situations and everything, I can't even remember what the number would be, but it was like 35,000. And I said, you'd have to come to the closing table with 35,000. And I said, I can do it for a little less than that. I was like, probably 25. And he was like, I can do 23. And I said, okay. So he paid us. So, but it was literally just laziness. Like if his house was pristine, it was in perfect condition, it was beautiful. If he would have put it on the market as soon as he knew about the transfer, he would have been fine. But he was paying for the convenience of not having to do any of that, and he just didn't do anything till the last minute. So, I mean, it wasn't really a motivation as much as it was just he had to because he didn't have the option. So there's just so many different reasons that people do it. It doesn't always make sense. Even his, to this day, I go, what a dork. I mean, there was no need for it.
Was there much upside for you on it?
So there ended up being, because we ended up holding that house for many, many years, but we did have a flood in it. Like 3 months after we took it over, there was a flood, and it was kind of nice though because the insurance covered all the costs of the repairs and everything. But then the Knoxville market started to take off really good. But yeah, we got, I want to say like a $35,000 down payment on that house. So we got the money from him, and then we got a $35,000 or thereabouts down payment on that house for a lease option. So yeah, we did all right. I always do deals where I'm going to make money. Like, I'm not in a hurry to do a deal, and I don't need your deal. So, I mean, like with him, I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to help unless you can come to the closing table with money. I mean, and that's the way I look at all the deals. I'm not going to do a deal that doesn't make sense.
Yep.
There's some questions in the chat. Let me just quickly.
Yeah, Courtney, one of those questions was mine.
Okay.
How are you transferring the deed then? Are you just doing a quick claim deed?
Yeah.
Or is it a full warranty deed?
We do a quick claim deed, and our title company does all of those and creates them for us. So there was a period of time when we did tabletop closings, and we would do our own deeds and have people sign those over. And then, you know, across the country, I try to stay in touch with what's happening, and people were getting into trouble doing some of that. And so I just now have my title company do it. If there's any reason to not do a quick claim deed, sometimes they'll come to me and say, hey, we really want to do a warranty deed on this. Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I don't really care. And honestly, I've been in the business 30 years. I couldn't tell you the difference between each deed. I mean, I know what a quick claim deed is, but there's little nuances between each of them. I don't care. And they go into the title company and sign all the documents now. And I just feel a little bit safer doing that. And plus, it's just a way for me to outsource things. So they go into the title company, all the documents are prepared. The title company does all of the documents, has them sign everything. We have this 2-page CYA document that they basically have to agree to everything that we've ever had problems come back on us over. I have a 2-page agreement that basically they have to initial next to every single thing. So we do all that. We get a limited power of attorney for the house. We have them sign an authorization so that we can send it to the mortgage company to be able to talk to the mortgage company, and then a few other docs. So the title company does all of that. The only thing is, I will say that the title company will not record those deeds for us here in Arizona, at least, if it's an FHA loan. So,
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I think, what kind of contract do you use? I use a regular contract, Alex. It just says, the contract just says like a normal contract. So I'm sorry, you guys can't see the question. Alex asked, what kind of a contract do you use? And do you need to get an attorney involved? So it's a regular contract. My contract, the way it's written up, it has a purchase price. And then I have like a line for each thing, like taken subject to, or all cash, or owner financing. So I have a line for each of those. And then I just put the amount. So if I'm buying your house for $500,000, and I'm giving you cash of $20,000 and taking over subject to $480,000. So that's the way my contract is read, but I've had that made over the years when that was my primary focus. Do you need to get an attorney involved? You need to have your contract at least adjusted so that it's primed to purchase. Please say that 3 times fast. Through subject to. So you need to have somebody look at that in your state. To my knowledge, there's no states that this is an issue in. But what I would be most concerned about is the CYA document. Like, I'll give you an example of something we tell people all of the time when we're sitting down with them. This is something that's on our CYA. I think there's like 30 things now. It's almost 3 pages now. It's 2 still, but one more thing and then we're going to be at 3. So we tell people all the time when we're sitting down with them face to face buying their house that we don't know when we're going to get this loan out of your name, because they will ask, well, how long will it be in my name for? I have no idea. And I explained to them how we're going to sell it. We're going to sell this to people who on a lease option. So we help them get their credit in order, and we help them. Typically, these are people who have had health issues or whatever. They have hospital bill problems, so their credit's not great, but we're going to help them get, their credit straightened out, and we're going to help them purchase it. We obviously don't get paid a big chunk of our money until that happens. So we're going to do that as quickly as possible, but it could be a year, it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years. We don't know. We tell them that verbatim almost every time we're sitting down, and never fails when they need money or they need something or it pops up on their credit or whatever. They'll call and say, you said you were going to get this done in X amount of time. And it's like, no, we did not say that. And so now on our CYA document, one of the items they have to sign or initial, it basically just says, I understand that this loan may be in my name for the entire 30-year period, remaining part of the 30-year period, and blah, blah, blah. So there's things like that have over the years have popped up that have become an issue. I understand that I cannot file bankruptcy without calling Courtney Jones first, and it has my phone number, kind of thing. So it's things like that have become an issue that we've added to this document where they have to initial next to each of them. So that's where it's kind of good to get an attorney involved. But as far as actually closing or anything, you don't need an attorney, but you would want to have them review your contract. I think that's all the questions. So I'll do that, and then we'll continue.
Courtney, there was one more. She was asking how did the logistics work of making the payments for the seller?
So I will say that it's actually gotten a little bit easier over the years. You can do it electronically from your bank. You can set up ACH, all of those types of things. What happens is when we take over the loan, when we take over the house, we send a change of address to our business address to the mortgage company. So usually we get a statement from the seller with the mortgage company information on it, and it tells you right on it where to send the change of addresses. So we send a change of address and have it come to our office from now on. So it might come in the name of Joe Smith, but it comes to my office. And then we'll decide if we want to send the check, or you can decide if you want to send the check or if you want to do some sort of direct deposit or whatever. So if you want to set up the direct deposit, you can do that. With each of our sellers, we go in and we ask them, do you already have an account set up online? Almost always they do anymore. So we get their username and their password. So you can set it up to make them automatic through ACH, direct deposit. We have on occasion done it through like my automatic bill pay through my bank app and stuff like that. But for the most part, we like to write checks still because I'm weird. Was that the only one, Mariah, that I missed?
So you're writing a check that, if you're writing checks, they're going to be from you or your company name, but it'll have the actual loan holder's like account number on it or something. Because I know they don't really pay attention to the name; they just apply it to the account.
They just zoom them through. Yep. So we send the check. It has the loan number on it. It has my company name in the upper left hand, and then down at the bottom it would say Laura Kaisner, account number 1234567. And usually we have the address.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, where do you find these deals subject to? All right. So realtors is a really good way to find them. It's just that it takes time to build trust. So as a realtor, I can tell you that I get probably 7 to 10 calls a week from people who just came out of a real estate seminar who are told to go find a realtor to do all the work for you, and then you can make all the money and you don't have to put any money down and you can go buy properties this way and just call realtors to do that. And so I can tell, usually who those people are when they call me. The average realtor cannot, because the average realtor hasn't been to a ton of these seminars and hasn't been dealing with investors for 30 years. So they get a call from somebody and then they get burned. Or they get somebody, I don't know who it was that asked the question before about how do you make sure that the realtor gets paid. They get somebody in there who's like, oh, well, I appreciate the lead, but I can't pay you. And they get screwed, which, is not cool. That's not cool. That's not how you should do business. So realtors do get a lot of crap. And so it does take time to build trust with them. You want to treat them like any marketing person or any person you would market to. Like if you're a realtor, you would be marketing to buyers and sellers, right? As an investor, you should be marketing to potential hard money or private money lenders. You should be marketing to realtors. You should be marketing to attorneys. These are all people who can help you and refer business to you over time. And so you want to set yourself up kind of as an authority and somebody who's going to be around for a while. Build a relationship with them. And once they see that you're going to be around for a while and they know that they can trust you and that you're going to do what you can to get them paid, then you're going to likely get some deals from them. But it's not, the everyday realtor doesn't run across these types of deals. So you have to, or they don't know that they're running across these types of deals. So you have to educate them on what are these deals. You have to stay in touch with them and be consistent. Like they should be seeing your company name and your business name on a monthly basis through either emails or newsletters or whatever it is you're doing in your marketing. And if you're not doing anything, you should be doing something, at least to realtors. Take them out to lunch, talk to them, explain to them what is an ideal subject to deal. How would you know if you ran across a subject to deal that you can't do anything for, but I could, that you could refer to me? And I'm sure you're going to ask the question, Mr. Realtor, how would you get paid? Let me just say, I don't know, because every deal is totally different. But what I can tell you from the bottom of my heart is I'm going to make sure you get paid somehow, some way. It may not be immediate and it may not be what you think you would get normally, but I'll make that up to you somehow, some way in the future. And so you have to make them feel comfortable with that, and they have to trust that you're going to do that. And then if you're around for a long time and you're not just the fly by the seat of the pants, called you one time, I'm looking for no money down deals, and then they never hear from you, or they send you 10 no money down deals and you never do crap, then they're not going to want to waste their time with you. But if you're consistently around them and you're educating them and helping them through the process as well, that's when you're going to start to get referrals from realtors. Okay. One of my favorite things I like to tell realtors, because I tell them if you go to a house and the person they have to sell quickly for whatever reason. Okay. So they're in a foreclosure situation or a divorce situation or whatever, and they need to sell quickly and you don't think you could get it done on time, then I would be a good person to call, because I can move quickly and I can get things done fast. Okay. And so that's typically, I don't go into describing subject to them. I don't explain to them what that is. I don't say to them at that point, I'll go in and take over their payments subject to, because they don't understand this any more than the average layman. Okay. That will come with time. But I just tell them, if you run into a situation where the seller needs to sell quickly and you don't think you're going to have time, if the average days on the market is 90 and this person has 30 before the foreclosure, then give me a call and let me see if I can help. And the more time I have to get it done, the better, but I can get it done quickly. Okay, so that's kind of how you want to treat realtors. Include them in your company emails that you send out for private lenders. Show them like how the deal flow works. Show them all of that kind of stuff. So if you're sending out things now for potential private lenders, or when you've got a deal and you need private lending, if you're sending those things out, include realtors in that. Because what happens is, every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's calling them for no money down deals kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But if they're seeing your stuff consistently and they're like, oh, he's doing another deal. Oh, she's doing something else. Oh, that's cool. Then eventually they're going to start to see that, okay, you're serious about this business. That's when they're going to start to take you seriously, when you've been around for a while and they've seen those kind of things consistently happening. Okay. I have a little booklet that I put together that I use. It's a booklet that we have that goes out to sellers when we schedule an appointment to go meet with them. We have it delivered. And then I also send that to realtors on a regular basis. So it's a little book that tells what we do, how we do it. It's a marketing brochure, essentially. It's got information about our attorney in there, our title company. It's got testimonials, people, lenders that refer us, all that kind of stuff is all in this little book. And so it's basically a company brochure that just tells them, we're amazing and here's all the people that agree. So I send that to them so that they can see, okay, if I'm going to call anyone, I'm going to call this person. Those are all different ways to help educate them. The biggest thing is you've got to let them know how they're going to get paid. And sometimes that may be the honest conversation, like I said before, of I don't know how you're going to get paid, but I can promise you, Mr. Realtor, I'm going to make sure you get paid. So here's some of the ways I've done it in the past. And then I'll start to describe it to them. Sometimes the house will be perfect and we'll be able to get a full commission on it right away, and you'll get your full commission and we'll all walk away happy and fat. Okay. Sometimes there's not going to be enough money up front in the deal, and I might have to give you a note to pay you later or to pay you monthly. Or I might be able to give you part of it, and then I'll promise to give you a listing on my next house, or I'll refer somebody over to you that's ready to buy or whatever. So I can make sure you get paid that way. So you have those conversations, be honest, and then, be true to your word. Where do you find sub-2 deals? So to the person who said before, I still have a hard time understanding why people would be motivated to do this. These are some of the most common ones. Divorce leads are huge. A lot of times it's a divorce situation. They're going to be deeding the house to the other spouse anyway, unless you're here in a community property state. So it's like, why not just deed it to one more time? They're in a stressful type situation. They are most oftentimes not communicating with one another and not having good communications with each other, and they just want to get done and get out of the house. Okay. Although I will say lately we're seeing a lot more divorced people getting divorced and continuing to live together, which is really weird. But so that's a huge one. Job transfers. We bought many houses with the situation like the New Jersey guy I told you about. A job loss, that's always a sad one to me. They lost their job. They can't find another job. Or they found another job, but they can't afford this house that they bought. Those are huge ones. Foreclosures is probably the biggest one. And then, that and pre-foreclosures, I'd say those are ties. So those are a lot of the reasons that people are doing subject to deals and calling us. Some of our marketing actually just says, would it help you if we took over your payments? Would it help you to get out from under your house payment? So that a lot of times is the draw that brings them in to call us or reach out to us on Facebook or on our website or whatever. You have to keep in mind their motivation. These are not everyday sellers who have time to wait for top dollar. These are folks that are motivated to move quickly for whatever reason. There's emotion involved. Sometimes it's simply that they don't need all the money right away, but rarely. Usually it's just that they need to get out from under the payments, or they just don't want the hassles of listing it and selling it with other people. There's always emotion involved. Always. Usually it's just that they're looking for debt relief or a quick sale or both. That is, I would say, 98% of the time. I can think of a few times, maybe 3 or 4 off the top of my head. I mean, honestly, if I went through all the files, I might think of a few others, but where it's been out of convenience more than anything. But usually it's just because they need a quick sale or they need debt relief and they need it quickly. These are the magic words for getting a seller to say yes. I encourage you to take your cameras out and take a picture of this. Essentially what you want to do, I don't ever talk about subject to the seller. I don't sit down and say, okay, Mr. Seller, I can absolutely help you. Let me either give you a cash offer or a subject to offer. They'd be like, what? What is that? Most people in the real estate business don't even know what subject to means. So you have to break all of this down into words that they would understand and that they are going to get. So you have to talk in everyday terms. So what I typically will say to them, of course, this is after they've told me their situation. So I ask, so what's the reason that you're selling, or what's the situation that you're in, or whatever. And then I'll say something along these lines. Obviously, I use their name. That sounds like a really stressful situation you're going through, and I'm sorry to hear about that. And I'll go into some details. Let's say they're going through a divorce. I'll say, oh, and I'm sorry to hear that you're going through a divorce. That sounds really stressful. Thank you for sharing all this with me. And of course, I'm saying all of that in a kind, empathetic tone, unlike what I just said to you all. That was my presenter voice. And usually I'm talking like I'm concerned. I'm talking a little slower. Oh my gosh, that sounds horrible. I'm so sorry that you're going through that. That sounds like a really stressful situation, and nobody should have to go through that. I'm really sorry that you're having to go through that. And then I'll pick up my tone and my speed and my energy a little bit. And I'll say something like, okay, well, Bob, if I could figure out a way to get those payments made for you so that you can be free of that debt and you don't have to worry about making that $2,500 a month payment anymore, would that be something that would be helpful to you? Okay. I just asked him if he'll sell me his house subject to, without saying the word subject to and confusing the heck out of him. Okay. So that's the magic words to use. Now, when I'm saying that, I'm nodding yes, of course, because that's subliminal sales. You have to do that. And I'm making good contact with him. Now, if he's smart and he asks me more questions, great. I'm happy to answer those and to go into more detail. Most people would be like, wait, you can just I don't have to make my house payments anymore? And I'll be like, well, I mean, I can possibly figure out a way to make that happen. Does that sound like something that would work for you? Yeah, when can we start doing that? Is usually kind of the response you get. Yeah, like how fast can that happen? And I'll say, well, I need to come out and see the house for sure. And we can sit down and take a look at it. When would you want to have that happen? Well, I'm not even going to be able to make this month's payment. And I'll say, okay, well, how far behind are you? Well, I made last month's, but I made it late. Okay, well, let me get out there. We'll take a look at it. It sounds like we might have something we can both win from. I'll come out and take a look at it, and then we'll figure out a timeline from there. So that's sort of the words that I use to explain it to them. Never once have I had a seller say to me, oh, so you mean buying it subject to? Because they don't know what that means, okay? Don't use those words with people. And I really wouldn't even use them with realtors, because I would say 85 to 90% of realtors don't even know what it means, okay? When the deal comes around and you get into a situation and that's what you're going to do with their client, then you might have that conversation with a realtor. But I would do it in person or over Zoom, where you can show them a closing statement and show them that it's already pre-printed on there, because the very first thing they're going to say is, oh, that's not legal. Loans aren't assumable anymore. That's not legal. Those are the two things a realtor is going to tell you. I'm not asking to assume it, and yes, it's very legal. So you can show them right then and there. It makes it a little easier. All right. Questions? This is the end of my presentation. So question away. Oh, there's more in the chat. Hold on. Let me open that up. I don't have to multitask now. Do I ever take deals? Amanda wants to know if I ever take deals with owners that have a lot of equity. If so, how do I structure that? Yeah, for sure. So I love when they have a lot of equity. It depends. So I'm all about finding a win-win for everybody. And I know that's such a cliche term, but that's really what I want to do. So if I'm sitting down in front of you and you have $100,000 worth of equity, I prove to you that you actually have $100,000 worth of equity, meaning you really have what looks like $140,000 or $50,000 worth of equity. But once you take all that stuff away, it's really $100,000. Okay. Then I want to get you that money however I can. So it depends on a few things. This is where the creative part comes in. And it depends on if the person needs it or not. Have they lived in the house for 2 of the last 5 years? If they haven't, they're going to get hit with tax stuff big time. Okay, so they don't want a check for $100,000 in a big lump sum, because they're going to have to pay half of that to the IRS. Nobody wants to give any of that to them. And so I will ask them, how would you like to save on taxes and get a monthly income to support this instead of having to pay a big lump sum of taxes? And I might structure it where it's a second note and I'm paying them a little bit a month for that amount. If they need some of it up front, well, I have to buy a house. Well, how much do you need for down payment on that? Well, I'm buying a $300,000 house. Okay. And are you putting down 20%? Yes. Okay. So how about if I give you the $60,000 that you need for that, but then we write a note for the rest? How would that work for you? Now, I can only do that if I think I'm going to be able to get a $60,000 down payment on selling that house. So I have to know my market well enough to know, am I going to get that or not? If I'm not confident that I'm going to get that, I'm not going to structure that way. I'm going to work something else out with them, or I'm going to plan to just turn around and sell the house. I just got a deal actually I don't know if he's on here, but one of your members I sent it to earlier today. I just got a subto deal from somebody who's looking for $110,000 as a down payment. I suspect, without having called the wholesaler yet, I suspect that's because he has to give a big chunk to the seller because they have a lot of equity. So yeah, we do them all the time. We structure them a lot of different ways. To me, it's all about having those conversations and talking. This is not a, here's the list, this is the only way you can do this kind of business. This is at least the way I run mine, this is a find out what people need and fulfill that need and make sure I'm still making a profit and can live with the outcome of it kind of a business and get creative and solve problems. So hope that answers that, Amanda. Do you ever use a third-party servicing company to handle mortgage payments? I love that this question comes up every time now. No. And here's the reason. Sellers don't know to ask for it. It's a pain in the rear end, in my opinion. I have a full-time bookkeeper, and so it doesn't make sense for me. Now, if I hadn't been in the business 30 years and didn't have an office set up and all of those things, then might I today, because those weren't even a thing 30 years ago when I started doing all this. So it wasn't something we did. People always think sellers are going to ask for it. Sellers don't even know to ask for it. They don't even understand why their mortgage is going to a different person than when they signed the person they signed the paperwork from. So it's not because they're asking for it. I don't do it, but I'm not opposed to doing it. It's just not something I've ever done. But I know a lot of people who do. I think they have a third-party servicing company as well that can make payments on your behalf. Yes, they do. How do you construct a subto deal? What kind of contract do you use? I already answered that one. Okay, I think I answered them all.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions in the chat.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to jump on and ask any last questions?
So by a show of hands, who's coming to Tempe in 2 weeks? Oh, wow, a good amount of you. Nice. Okay, good. Well, I look forward to meeting you guys. Come up and introduce yourselves.
Look forward to meeting you too. Thank you for the class.
You're welcome, everybody. Let me give you my contact information. Actually, I have it here on the last slide. There you are. There's me. You can find me on social media. I have a Facebook group called Ins and Outs of Creative Real Estate. That's my website that I run, Best REI Tips. I do a lot of training like this on there. So if you need any help or anything, feel free to find me.